Let's talk about when it's a good idea to depict transphobia in your writing and what you should really keep in mind when writing about these issues. I'm aiming this video mostly at cisgender writers, just so you know, so with that over with, if you're here, you're probably doing some research because you want to include a character or more than one character who is transgender into your writing. Thank you for that. Let's talk about transphobia. Because if you're going to have a transgender character in your writing, you might think that it's natural that you're also going to include transphobia, because transgender people have to deal with transphobia all the time, so it's realistic, right? And it is, but that might not mean that you need it there. The question you first need to ask yourself is, what is your purpose with including this transgender character into your story? Who is your audience, and what do you want them to take away from this story in regards to this specific thing, to the transgender issue? Because depending on what your point with the story or with that specific subplot of the story is, it might actually be a better idea to not include any transphobia into the story. Let's explore a few different scenarios when, in my opinion, you should or should not be including transphobia in your fiction. And this is all from my perspective as one trans man. You might disagree with me, other people might disagree with me. If you do, or if you have any questions, of course, let me know in the comments below. So scenario number one. You are writing this story because you want to show other cis people how transphobia can affect trans people and make their lives horrible in an effort to garner sympathy for us. If that's your point, I appreciate the sentiment, but consider that this might not be your story to tell. Again, this is if you are cis and not trans yourself. Because at the very least, if this is your intention, I strongly urge you to find a trans person who is willing to co-author this book with you. Because this is an issue that trans people know very well, and we want our voices out there for people to hear. Cis people explaining to other cis people how transphobia is a problem is important in a way, because we all know that there are certain types of people who will not listen to the minority, they will listen to other people of their own kind. They won't listen to trans people, they will listen to other cis people. And that's a problem in itself. The point is, again, and I cannot stress this enough, if you are cis, please consider using your privilege to amplify trans voices, and having a trans co-author is a great way to do that. Beyond that, I'm not going to give any general advice on this particular scenario, because I don't think this is a scenario where general advice is really going to work. So let's move on to something that I think I can give more specific advice on. And that is the scenario where you are writing this story to show other cis people how they can be good allies. I mean, you can do both this and the previous thing at the same time, but if this is your focus, then you're writing the story from the perspective of a trans ally instead of a trans person, and that makes a difference. Not saying that you shouldn't definitely get a transgender sensitivity reader, but that's an entirely different thing. Either way, should you include transphobia if this is your focus with a story? Perhaps. There are many things that you can do as an ally even when there has been no transphobia anywhere around. Just treating the transgender person as a person and affirming their gender and things like that goes a really long way towards being a good ally. I read a few months ago now a Swedish book, in which there was a non-binary character, I am pretty sure. And that was a minor character, was a friend of one of the main characters, and there was no transphobia anywhere in this book, but we still saw that the main character was a good ally, because whenever she was talking to or about her friend, she used the right pronouns, and she just treated them like the person that they were. So that kind of thing can still be done even if you're not including transphobia. Also, I realize that I have not yet told you why including transphobia might be a problem, but I promise that I am getting to that. Now, of course, many, if not most, trans people are going to face transphobia in their life, and if you're trying to teach your readers how to be good allies in those situations, then there is a point to showing the transphobia in the book. What I want to urge you here is to make sure that the allyship is the takeaway and not the transphobia. I've been struggling to really explain what this means, but what I fear might happen is that you want to show how ridiculous transphobia is, and so you bring up all of these straw men, all of the legitimate concerns that the transphobes on Twitter, for example, always bring up. Twitter is the place where I deal with most of this stuff. Basically, you bring up J.K. Rowling's entire transphobic essay and you have your trans ally character respond to these claims. And sure, you're going to show how ridiculous these things are, and you're going to show that they are wrong, but you're also giving voice to that type of transphobia. And we have enough people putting these kinds of claims out there without an ally also doing it, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Let me know if you want me to explain that better. I'm also going to give you an idea of what I think is a good alternative to this. If you want to show transphobia in your story, show it on a more personal level. And there are several reasons for that. One of them is that a more personal level of transphobia is going to hit your readers harder, and you probably want that, because that tends to be what we writers want. So instead of talking in general about bathrooms or single-sex spaces or things like that, have the transphobe aim the transphobia at a specific trans person. And then, of course, show the ally supporting that specific trans person. I have made a video on how to specifically write a good ally. I'm going to link that in the description, so I'm not giving specific advice on how to do that here. You check that video if you want to. The point is that those larger arguments, the ones about bathrooms or single-sex spaces and all trans people, you can never win them. No matter how good your arguments are, there are always going to be another straw man, and another one after that, and another one after that. But when something is aimed at one specific person, A, like I said, it's gonna hurt more, which is good if you want your readers to feel something about this. And B, because this hurts a specific person, a specific character more, that is where the allyship feels the most important in a way. Basically, it's in those situations that you can really show how great an ally that you are, or how great an ally that your character is. Again, I hope that made sense. Either way, I'll leave it at that. Let me know if you have any questions, and we are moving on to the next scenario. And the next scenario is where your audience is trans people who want to see representation. If that is what you want, if that is the reason why you're including trans people in your book, should you include transphobia? And if so, what kind? And the first thing that I want you to consider is, do you really need transphobia to do this? Because some trans people, myself included, would much rather read a story where there is no transphobia, where people like us are just allowed to live our lives and our gender is affirmed and no one questions us and everything is just good. Maybe not everything, because you still need a conflict, but the conflict doesn't have to be transphobia. The point is that we see transphobia all the times in our real lives. Some people see it less than others, but still, maybe we don't need to see transphobia in books as well. That said, I do realize that there are instances where maybe realism has to win out. If your story is set in a high school in our world, I imagine that it is kind of impossible to not have to deal with transphobia. Unfortunately, but you could also make a world where there is no transphobia even in a high school. That might be nice to read. But the point there is that if you do feel like this book wouldn't feel real if there was no transphobia in it, then please refer back to my video on writing trans allies, because at the very least, what trans people want to see is people standing up for the transgender character in your story. If, on the other hand, it is all possible to write this story without adding in any transphobia, I strongly encourage you to go with this option. And especially if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, it is not at all impossible to create a society where transphobia is not a thing. And I've made a video on this too, so you should check that out. But if your audience is transgender people who want to see representation, what we do want to see is transgender characters flourishing, living their lives, being who they are, and not having to deal with crap like transphobia. That's the escape of reality that we want. That's the escape of reality that I want. I'm not speaking for all trans people, but me, and I know at least some other trans people, this is what we want to read. Again, check out my other videos on this. Here's some suggestions for you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to my views on this. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, or contact me privately if you'd rather do that. All of my contact information is down in the description. Thank you for watching, be safe, I will see you next time.